Brightwood is a sci-fi horror movie directed by Dane Elcar. Has it all: a time paradox, gore, mystery, and a gruesome twist ending. Brightwood begins as Jen goes for a morning jog with her husband, Dan, lagging not too far behind. She wants to do 4 laps around the lake, and he's come along because it's the only quality time he gets to spend with her. The first audio the audience hears is the podcast Jen is listening to as she runs, a podcast about separation and divorce. Their marriage is at a crossroads. Dan repeatedly reminds Jen that they've been together a long time and that their relationship could go in one of many directions. Dane Elcar's word choice is no accident. Dan's phraseology foreshadows everything that's about to happen. Soon enough, we learn that Dan drank 2 bottles of wine at a party to celebrate Jen's promotion and may have hit on her coworker. She thinks he's a loser and takes off to run ahead of him. But upon completing her first loop of the lake trail, she realizes that the path that led from their neighborhood to the park is, bizarrely, gone. At first, she and Dan bicker as they try to solve the problem of the missing trailhead. Are they lost? Did the wind blow down some trees? Is someone messing with them, moving the no swimming sign? Solutions don't present themselves, and to add extra confusion to their predicament, they keep seeing a mysterious hooded figure in the distance. Dan and Jen experience small strange phenomena as soon as they get to the lake. Someone crashes into Dan while running, but he doesn't catch a glimpse of who it is. Both he and Jen hear sounds that give them headaches, and then there's the looming presence of a figure in what appears to be a brown hooded sweatshirt. But Dan and Jen only begin to suspect that something might have gone wrong on a supernatural level when Jen drops her earbuds. On their next lap, 2 pairs of earbuds are on the ground. Desperate for help, they work up the nerve to confront the person in the hoodie, who refuses to turn around even when Dan throws a pebble at them and Jen taps their shoulder. A second hooded figure sprints by, and the first one turns around and screams for them to run. Curiously, he looks an awful lot like Dan. Moments later, Jen is brutally murdered by yet another hooded figure, who impales her with a sharpened stick. It turns out the lake trail is a temporal and spatial loop. Though the rules aren't strictly defined, it seems like each time someone makes it all the way around, to use some Marvel Cinematic Universe terminology, another variant is generated. This explains why, until this point, Dan and Jen have run into versions of themselves that seem a little off. It's because they're multiples who haven't participated in the same conversations, or shared the same experiences. It also explains why there are ever more earbuds on the ground each time they return to the sign. After his Jen is killed, Dan encounters another Jen, whose shoulders are sunburned. He promises her won't leave her just before another Dan puts that Dan out of his misery so that the sunburned Jen can have his sweatshirt. This Dan and Jen are more experienced at surviving in the lake loop, but they still have mixed feelings about murdering their variants, and they recoil in disgust at their bloodied, lifeless selves. At least, Jen does, until she has to finish off a Dan and clearly derives some satisfaction about actually getting to stab him in the neck. The audience now follows this version of the couple as they come to terms with their situation, which Jen describes as being stuck in hell with Dan. They wonder about why they're stuck and how long they've been there, and they spy on other variants as they jog and argue on the trail, when they stumble upon a makeshift tent in which a corpse of a Dan variant has badly decomposed. They both accept that there is no escape and profess their love for each other. Unfortunately, this Dan is quickly dispatched by another hooded figure. Jen tries to flee from the attacker and falls into a pile of one of her own variant's remains, then hides in the lake, despite the no swimming signs, until the threat has passed. A disoriented and scared Jen spots a silvery orb in the brush. As she gazes at her own reflection, she's killed by who's revealed to be a Jen variant in a blue hoodie that's completely saturated with mud. At the very end of Brightwood, the variant of Jen in the mud-brown sweatshirt drags her kill, the Jen we had been following for the final third of the movie, back to her encampment. There, a Dan variant is feasting upon meat. It had been previously established during one of their conversations that Dan is not a hunter. But the last iterations of Dan and Jen realized they needed food. These final versions have figured out how to get it, as there doesn't appear to be any wildlife in the water or in the woods surrounding it. Hunting the more frightened and vulnerable copies of themselves is their only option. The most experienced Dan and Jen have fully reconciled themselves to their fate and have turned to cannibalism to survive indefinitely in this purgatory. Judging from their well-worn weapons and the nonchalant way they kill and consume their victims, it appears they've been at it for a while, what Jen might call a stupid amount of time. In the end, while Dan and Jen have finally learned how to function together, their continued existence depends on their willingness to constantly kill themselves and each other. Brightwood has something to say about perspective when it comes to deciding whether or not to stay with one's partner, but it's also a commentary on how complicated feelings can be in long-term relationships. Dan and Jen do love each other, but they hate each other too. Elcar is illustrating how, in essence, marriage is choosing to be stuck with someone who's sometimes your hero, and sometimes your villain. While the film doesn't offer an explanation, it at least provides an illusion. That's also something of a meta joke. As if to make fun of Dan, who could credibly harbor crackpot theories, Jen puts forth the notion that alien time travel technology may have crash-landed in their exact location simply because of their bad luck. This is an egocentric view of the world, but it's in keeping with the world building in Brightwood, in which only Dawn and Jens exist. Just before the end, Jen stumbles upon a metallic orb. The sound that's been giving them headaches throughout the movie is the loudest within its radius. Though it's not spelled out, the viewer could come to the conclusion that Jen was right. So that's Brightwood film summary and ending explained. I hope you like this video. Please leave a comment and subscribe to this channel. See you in another video. Bye.